let's get started. So Chris Lengiza, the man behind the mask. Everybody sees Chris on social media, on Procore's website, and the biggest events that you guys throw. I mean, you're always there. You're always guiding everybody through interesting conversations and discussions. And I think the last time I saw you was at the golf event. And I'm like, I just want to get some time with that guy. Like just gonna get him to talk a little bit. So that's what this idea came about. Like, can we just spend some time where we just talk about this stuff and just go, as clean as we can be, and as candid as we can be about every topic that we all want to hear about.
Yeah.
So we'll dive into all of that today. So excited to have you here. I would love for you to start with like a brief introduction for anybody that may not know who you are. Please take a little minute.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, Chris Lengiza, I am the Global Technology Evangelist at Procore. Before I did that, I actually worked in construction for about 15 years. So I've been at Procore for a little over 7 years. Came from industry. I like to tell people I did basically every job in construction without being the accountant on a project. I ran quality, I ran safety, I ran BIM and VDC, I ran projects as a project engineer, I was a superintendent. My first project, I was out in the field with the laborers pulling down sprinkler pipe. Much to my dismay, I ruined my brand new white Whiting Turner shirt on that job on like the second day. And so, yeah, just come from industry. That's why I love it so much. Is it's just it hits home to me in many, many ways. And now get to spend my time working with customers, working with the industry, trying to think about what's next and getting our industry ready to make these steps forward. We were jokingly talking about making transition into a more of a transformation in the way that we do things. And that takes a lot more than just deploying a piece of software, right? We have to be aware of what's happening in people's businesses. We have to help guide them along that. And that's a lot of the great work that I get to do with a team of people kind of all around the world that are tracking these trends and these things that are happening. And as you said, I get to speak at a lot of conferences and lead a lot of conversations, and that's great.
That's awesome. And you said you worked in construction before. Like, how many years did you do in construction before you get into the dark side?
Yeah. So I worked mostly for general contractors for about 15 years before I came over to Procore.
Wow. So let's dive into a couple questions that I love getting your thoughts in. But I think one of the biggest things that's happening in construction, as you pointed out, software is kind of a new thing that we're starting all to get used to deploying in projects and so on. And I think with the advent of like moving everything from paper to digital, kind of have gone over that bridge. So what is one of the the things that you think construction outsiders, people that don't come from the industry, get completely wrong about the space?
Yeah. It's funny, you mentioned the golf tournament earlier, and we did a little bit of an experiment where we walked around and asked people all kinds of questions about construction to see how much they knew about the industry. And one of the questions we were asking people is, how much do they think that people that work in this industry make, right? And there's still this really common misconception about like what type of career and what type of earnings people can have in the construction industry. And I think that's a reason that we don't see as many people coming into the industry today as we need. Is there's this thought that, oh, it's not a good career. I can't make any money doing that, right? It's a minimum wage job. And the reality of it is there's so many different careers in construction, whether you work on the trade side, and trust me, look at the numbers, electricians and plumbers and mechanical folks, they're making more millionaires than almost any other field right now. And so like, don't knock those jobs. And then there's all the stuff in, working for general contractors and design firms and all of the other things that need to happen. And those are great career paths as well. And so I think people's misconception is that it's really narrow and not necessarily as great of a career as it can be for many.
Wow, I did not know that information. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
It's amazing that there should be more people coming into the space. I think the physical labor is what attracts a lot of people and probably detracts a lot of other people too, given the computer revolution and everything we have access to now. Super interesting. And then there's so many workflows in construction. You talk about the transmittal workflow, which is historic now and no longer exists.
Yeah.
What do you think is like one workflow that if you could like wave a magic wand, you would wave and just solve it for construction?
Yeah, this one's rooted in a lot of like personal pain. And that is, I just think our like submittal process in general in construction is broken. The whole process needs to be basically re-engineered. But the concept that like I went to school for 4 years to be a civil engineer, and for like the first like 3 to 4 years of my career, I basically spent my time chasing down paper documents to prove that someone was going to bring the right materials to the job site, right? And I had to review them all and I had to mark them up, and they got them wrong a lot. There's just so much opportunity in this process. Like I can't think of too many other industries that do something like this. And there's just like this is a place that's ripe for disruption in a lot of ways. And I think honestly is also a place where, the advancements in technology, AI, large language models, automations, I think we'll see us really chip away at this process in a big way. And why I think that matters is not so that we can get rid of project engineers, because we still need plenty of those, but they don't need to spend their time doing this, right? Like, can they spend their time doing more work to coordinate across trades, to coordinate and come up with new workflows on the job site and the way that work happens, instead of just chasing paperwork?
Wow, awesome. What, given that this is like a great example of a use case you would solve, if you could, what do you think people are solving with AI right now that
Yeah.
is complete nonsense? What's like
Ooh.
one example of like something you saw and you're like, well, that's never going to work, or is nonsense in terms of a workflow or use case?
Listen, I can't say that I believe anything is complete nonsense right now, because what we've seen happen over the last like just 9 months, like just let's just take a look back at November of 2024, right? I don't think any of us thought that as many of the things that have happened from then till now would have happened. But I think there's some things that people are over indexing on a little bit. I think I think generative design is an area that's interesting, right? I think we will see generative design, but not in the way that people are talking about it. I think people are talking about like, I'm going to click one button and I'm going to get a full set of design for a building, including of all the systems inside of it and everything. I don't think that's realistic, right? There's too much human input there. We don't have enough of the data in the right ways today in order to do that. Now, do I believe that you can automate a layout? Sure. Do I think that we will see systems inside of a building automated in their design or their coordination? Absolutely. But I think like there are some groups just kind of talking about this idea that you're going to be able to click a button and all of a sudden have an office building like pop out. There's too much that we need to know about means and methods, location, materials, human preferences, right? All these things that we're going to have to iterate on that over and over again. And so it's probably somewhere in between, right? And I think we'll see automation of systems first, whether it's mechanical, electrical, plumbing, inside of it, maybe even steel, right? Those are things that are defined by a set of codes, by engineering calculations. Those are all things that math is really, really, really good at. Our computers are really, really good at. I think it'll take a while for us to get to the point where it can actually take in a lot of like the human elements around what makes a building have personality and what makes a building work for the end user's use case. And so I think that one's a little overhyped right now.
Got it. Yeah, I think context is what you're hinting at, right? Like I think there's some. I was kind of like trying to come up with a concept the other day or an explanation for this, but I think when humans are suffering from a lack of autonomy
Mm-hmm.
right now because everybody's paralyzed with so many distractions, and I think AI is suffering with a lack of context. Like it doesn't really have the context for most things.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like there's some place in the middle where
Yeah.
agency
Yeah.
and context meet, and you can get like gold. It's just like a window of opportunity, I think. It's like given that and your experience so far in the industry and seeing what's happening to AI, like if Procore was founded today,
Mm.
how do you think it would be built? Well, and certainly it would be different, but like where do you think it would be different?
I think this is a great question, right? Because I think we all would say, if you could start with a slate completely clean, how would you do something differently than you had? And I think AI in general and just the technology advancements in our industry today would change some things, right? When Procore came about, like candidly, Tui founded this before mobile devices. So think about that for a second. Like the way things were built, right? He was coming from an industry where our number one competitor was pen and paper. So it was literally about mirroring a process that was on pen and paper to make people comfortable to make those transitions. And so I think, if I think about the things that I would do differently today, if you were going to start Procore from scratch, I think people are becoming much more comfortable with technology in general and the way that they use, their phone or that they, use a laptop. And I think, especially now that so many users have like gleaned toward whether it's Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, like these chat-based interfaces, I would start from a place of no forms, right? And I would say, like, listen, we are going to collect this information through conversation, right? And whether that conversation has happened across a few humans or that conversation is happening between you and a computer or a digital assistant, that's how I would think about solving the problem. Now, still going to be super hard, right? Because everybody's gonna be like, where's my RFI form? Right? How do I get my budget from that, right? And I think the reality of it is that the interface that people engage with, it doesn't have to be the way that the information is stored or presented back to other users, right? And I would say, I think we think about this a lot at Procore actually on how we're evolving the way that people will interact with the software. It's not so much that we have to mirror these paper-based processes, but we're serving up the information to them in the way that they want to get it. And I think we think a lot about, and this is part of the partnership with Datagrid, is like, how do we get data into the system, right? And it's not always going to be that somebody comes and literally taps field to field to field to a form. It has to be about, hey, how do we get it from other sources? How do we have, an agent that creates some of that information and puts it into Procore? How do we have that information and go out and get processed and then put back into Procore, right? And so I think I would say if we were building it from scratch today, we'd probably start there. But the journey we're on is a little bit more of like, okay, how do we now start to transition to there based on, hey, what's available for technology today, what we already have from data and what we know about user behavior. And now we can go and automate and, change some of those inputs that our customers have been doing for a long time.
That's amazing. Yeah, so you're saying like systems of engagement, right? Like in UX and all these paradigms. I mean, it's a fascinating thing happening with user experience right now, which is all of our UX design tools and everything we ever made for the past 20 years was designed for point and click and keyboards, and then to mobile devices with like touch. And it all kind of goes out of the window, and you're like, oh, which tool do I use to design a voice agent? They're like, oh, no tool. There's no design for a voice, and you just talk and hope it's going to answer. So there's not even a way to design some of these experiences yet, because it's so new. So it's a step function change.
I think it's really interesting when you say that too, because like I used to be very like bearish on wearables, especially like glasses and like things like that. The Meta glasses actually changed my point of view on wearables in our industry. And it's not because of like, oh, I can see something on my glasses or it's tracking me. It's actually just the way that I can interact with quote unquote the internet, right? Or AI with them on, right? It can see what I see. I can ask a question about what I'm seeing. I can collect some data just by, being a crazy person and talking to myself or my assistant, right? And so, I mean, people at my kids' soccer games must think I'm absolutely nuts because I walk around the outside of the field and I'm just talking to myself for like seriously an hour, but I'm actually having a two-way dialogue with kind of my AI assistant on my glasses. And I think that's going to change, right? Like when you think about UI UX, it's going to be like, well, how can we make that experience better, right? Of someone talking to someone versus like, hey, how do we make the big orange button, right, stand out a little bit more so people know what the next step in the workflow is? No, we just guide them to it. We just ask them a question. It's just like, watch your kids. Like I tell people this all the time. I have a 10-year-old daughter, a 9-year-old daughter, and a 4-year-old son. I've been teaching my daughters to use ChatGPT. And I'm sure everybody did this, but we all did the experiment where you make a action figure of yourself with some prompts, right? So I did that with my daughter. And I sat down and I slammed away at the keyboard and I watched this and I told her what it was going to do. And then it made an action figure of Daddy, right? Well, then my daughter did it. And what did she do? She clicked on the microphone button and she just started talking to it, right? And she
No
did
way.
30 of them until she ran out of image credits, right? And then she was like, oh, cool, I can't do this anymore. What's next, right? But like they just think differently. And so we have
Yeah.
that generation coming into our industry that we need to think about. Like they don't have the same mental blocks or barriers around how they interact with software. You know, we're all looking for a keyboard. Remember when it was a big deal when they got rid of keyboards on iPhones, right? Like that was a whole thing. It was like, there's no keyboard. There's no physical tactile BlackBerry touch, right? It's because that's what we grew up with, right? Then this generation,
Yeah.
and so they're going to think differently.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. And I think like we're getting the first generation of people coming into the job market that actually learn everything through AI, right? Like, I mean, the people that are currently in the job market, they learned AI while they were working. The people that are coming in, they learned AI before they had a job, which means they could get a lot better than most of
Yep.
us
Yep.
at prompting and, doing all these things because they could spare more time into it. That's amazing. Well, that's a lot of great ideas and thoughts in there. I hope the entrepreneurs in the audience like spend their next 5 years doing something like tremendously useful rather than just spend 5 years doing something that may actually just change with all of this that we just talked about.
Yeah.
So what is moving into like people in leadership, because your role involves like I think defining some guidelines for like the narrative on the market and working with partners and all these things I've seen you do. What's one like hard lesson that you would like to share with everybody here? Something you learned in the space that you'd say, okay, like this took me a while, save you a couple of years of learning here.
Yeah. I think the thing that I would tell people is construction is a people business. Whether you realize it at the beginning of your career or you realize that like somewhere along the way, like, yeah, you can be the best at understanding the drawings on a project. You can always have your budget dialed in. You can, come up with the best designs. But at the end of the day, it's a people business. It's about being able to work with the people to collaborate across trades. It's about being able to brainstorm and come up with new design solutions with your design team. And candidly, and if you're not in the construction business, but you're serving the construction business because you're a contact person, right? You have to understand that those relationships really, really matter to them, right? And there's a lot of trust that needs to be built for them. And so I don't think that you can overlook the need for building personal relationships and building trust. And in a world that is right here in front of us, right, where AI agents, ChatGPT, people are going to that for all kind of things. The things that will differentiate you are who you are as a human, right, and how you can work with others and how you can shake somebody's hand and get a deal done or agree to something. It won't just always be about the best answer or the fastest answer. And so I tell people that, especially people that are young in their career, spend the time with that senior superintendent, learn from them, build their trust, like ask them questions, right? I did that on my first project. I used to buy my superintendent a ham, egg, and cheese sandwich every day. It was $1.75 at the place across the street. I didn't have it, I kind of did, but barely, right? And it was like I would get him a sandwich and me a sandwich, but I would get 20 minutes of his time every morning when I brought him that sandwich. And I would ask him all kinds of dumb questions, right? Like things that like I would just get his time because he was eating his sandwich and drinking his coffee. And so I would make sure I was there early, and I learned a lot, and I built his trust because he knew like I was curious and I was willing to like work on things. And so he would ask me to go and do projects that probably didn't have any business doing for a few more years, but he was like, I know you'll come to me if it's not going the way that I expect it to. And, invest in those personal relationships early.
Got it. I think, if you, is it because it's a local industry somewhat, because every building has to be built on site, like there's no way to, I mean, for the most part, to actually fabricate much of it. So you have to, people have to meet, they have to collaborate, they have to be, in the same physical location at some point. Do you think that plays a role in the industry being so people driven, or is there any other reason you see?
I think if you like think back to what we really are in construction is we're problem solvers, right?
Mhm.
And that's the role that many of us play in this industry. And their projects are complex. The problems are different on every job, and there's never been a job that hasn't had a problem to solve, right? And so you can try and solve all of them yourself, but somebody needs to implement the solution, right? Somebody needs to like help you. And sometimes there's bargaining that goes along with it, right? And that actually starts long before the construction process actually starts. You start to back up and you think about like from an owner's perspective, right? There's negotiating on land and getting land deals done. There's negotiating with municipalities on like getting through permitting. All of these things have to happen that involve humans. If it was as simple as like stamping out a widget, shipping it to a job site, and having some robots stack it up, right? We would be there already because somebody would have figured it, like found the financial reason to figure it out. But there's a reason
Yeah.
that those things haven't quite taken off yet. I think we'll see them come, but it'll be in concert with humans, right? Because at the end of the day, like a lot of these things are just going to require human interface into them.
Awesome. Makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
Let's talk about the, like your own, like, if you think about, like, because you're saying you're shadowing, in exchange for a sandwich, you're shadowing your. So who would you like to shadow? Like, if you could shadow somebody now, who would that be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I I really appreciate spending time with our customers. And even though like I could probably say, oh, well, I'd love to like go and like shadow Sam Altman and learn all the things about like running OpenAI and all that stuff. I actually think it would be more intriguing to shadow like a CEO who's kind of built a construction company from the ground up and gone from like a mom and pop startup all the way through to like a couple $1 billion, right? There's some of those out there still, right? A lot of them have transitioned, but there's a handful of them left. And I just think that journey, like the things you would learn along the way and the things that they had to overcome, would be so meaningful. And like kind of back to the human element, right? Like how did they get people to stay at their business as they were scaling? How did they decide like where to go next and where to invest and to grow and strategically, like maybe go to a different state, maybe go to a different market, maybe bring on more self-perform. There's so many things. And so like I think about like leaders like that have been able to take a business from kind of nothing, right? And really bet on themselves and grow that business. Like I would love to like just kind of sit behind one of those CEOs for a while. And I just love this industry so much that like I find it intriguing. There's so many stories you would find, like it would just keep you entertained or keep me entertained anyways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the, this industry has probably every business in this industry was built in that way, right? Somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would say, like
Mm-hmm.
most construction companies were built initially as a family owned business in some way. And then like we have seen already what happens when venture tries to start construction companies. Like that doesn't quite work. So we should be able to realize your dream, man.
Yeah,
We gotta
yeah.
find
It's
out somebody.
definitely possible. Definitely possible. I don't. By the way, I'll just throw a quick comment in there. I don't think that we are done seeing venture try and figure out how to build a construction company. I just think that that's going to come at us again in our
Oh
lifetime, and
yeah.
probably sooner than later.
Do you think because of robots or?
I think because of robots and technology, and candidly, like when I talk to leaders in our industry, I go, listen, you need to be thinking about how you rebuild your teams, how you rebuild, your processes inside of your business. Because if you don't, someone from the outside that's an expert and doing these things is going to go do it. And they're going to go just grab a few of your relationship people and plug them into that system, right? And so if you're not working on improving those things, you should be worried that somebody else is, right? It's the old adage, right? Like AI is not going to take your job, but someone using it will. Candidly, like AI is not going to replace your construction company, but a company who's figured out how to do that might, right? And the thing that they'll be lacking is that human relationship, and then you have to really value those people who have that skill set and that have those relationships. And so I think that's why we need to think about these things, is because people from outside our industry, and this goes back to like my recruiting pitch a bit ago, is there will be a lot of roles in our industry that don't exist today that will exist in the next few years. And I think it's going to bring a lot of people from outside of our industry that are like, oh, this is fun. This is an interesting problem to solve. Like, I have to imagine when you recruit, right, for your business, you probably are looking for people that like really want to solve an interesting problem. They don't necessarily always know about construction. And they're, but this is a fun problem to solve. And this is an industry that's like kind of taken a long time to digitize. Like, when am I going to get this opportunity again?
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I mean, when I think about it, like I think tech recruiting suffers from like a different problem, which is we hire for like human qualities, like people that have like tremendous amount of grit, are like intrinsically motivated. You know, a lot of things you actually see in construction people, like people that
Mm,
work in job sites, you have to wake up at, 5 and get to the job site and put on your boots and just go
yeah,
do it. Like there's nobody's gonna lift that, thing off the ground for you.
yeah.
So you see a lot of that in construction people, and then there's these human qualities you want to see when you're trying to hire in tech, which is like, can you connect with the customer, or
Mhm.
because the challenge with technology is that people get so distant from like what the user customer is attempting to do, and they don't actually get to feel that in the same way. So like we kind of like, tech recruiting is interesting because now with AI, it's even more obvious that you need people that have great human qualities, great problem solving skills, I would say, very creative people, right? A lot of things you
Mhm.
find in construction in some way.
Yeah. Almost makes a good case for some construction people to come over and work in construction tech, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. There you go. Like that's you're the example. Let's keep moving here. I have a few questions about product vision and
Yeah.
evolution,
Yeah.
specifically how Procore has transformed project
Mhm.
management. I think like before Procore, we kind of knew that this problem existed, but it wasn't very clear like what the problem was. There
Mhm.
was lots of point solutions. There were some ancient tools that were built over time to try to solve that. So what do you think is the next big transformation that's coming? Um, based on, I mean, clearly AI is part of that, but like, do you see any major shifts on the way that people do project management?
Yeah, I think, we talked a little bit about this already, right? But we went from this transition from paper to digital, right? And that was a big shift. And I think, we've been on that journey for, about 10 years now. And I think most companies, I won't say all, but most companies are somewhere on that journey, right? And I think the next step is going to be, we've been talking about it, but I don't know that people have really like leaned into it quite all the way yet, which is how do we actually use data, right? And this is where, things like AI become tools, things like machine learning, all of them like start to play a factor in here. Is you have to really start to think about, one, how do I get data into my system? How do I get data out of my system? And then how do I use that data as my competitive advantage, right? And you and I were at the Future of Construction Summit, and there were some conversations around this. And some people will question like how good their data that they have is, right, and whether they can use it today. But I strongly believe that we are going to become a much more data forward and data driven industry than we have been in the past, right? Everybody's like, well, Chris, 5 minutes ago you said humans are the most important part of construction. Now you're telling me data, right? It's the combination of those two, right? We will never go
Yeah.
all the way to every decision gets to be made with data, but we've spent so much of our careers and our time making decisions with our gut, right? Just going, oh, I've seen something like this before. I think I know how this is going to play out, right? But not really being informed enough to know, like, oh, I saw it once and that was one time that happened versus hundreds or thousands of occurrences of that, and whether or not that becomes a problem or not. And so I think that the big transformation is going to be, how do people actually put their data to work for them? And then candidly, how do they put things like AI agents, right? IoT, wearables, all of these things to work for them to collect more data.
More data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yep. And then, okay, now I need to use my human brain to help map and connect those things to then say, hey, I'm going to serve it up to you, Thiago. You're going to go and take a look at this. And now I need your experience layered on top of it. And then every time you say, okay, here's the decision I'm going to make, we start recording those things. So now we start to transfer knowledge across individuals and teams. And so I think that's going to be a big transformation for us. Like, I think a lot of like the most forward thinking contractors and owners that I know are trying to go down this path today. I think we've got a ways to go before you could say, hey, listen, our business is, every decision we make is based on data, because I still think there's going to be a lot of that human element, but it's the combination of the two and that human in the loop that's gonna take off.
That's great to hear. I mean, I think, selfishly, Datagrid is all about data and agentic AI, so we're on the right path. Well, looking at those workflows and like you talk about data and the usage of it, like where do you think is the discerning factor where you say like, okay, like this needs human judgment, or this, or like this is something that the machine could make as good of a decision as the human?
I think the real question is like, it's kind of like the 80-20 rule, right? Like, I always refer to AI or agents as like really good interns, right? You have to think about them as like, when you hire an intern, we've all hired probably an intern at some point or been an intern. When you showed up on day one, they didn't tell you to go and create the monthly project status report for the CEO of the company, right? They said, hey, can you go run these 5 reports for me, right? And then it was like, okay, cool. Like, you can teach them how to run those reports, and you ask them to run them every Monday. And when they get good at that, then you say, okay, can you take those 5 reports and can you summarize them and pull out any outliers? I'm going to teach you how to look at them, right? And then they get good at that. And it's like, okay, well, now can you work on writing, here's our format. I need you to take that information and distill it in here. But I would never just send it up the chain without looking at it first, right? And so when I think about what things we should focus on automating, it's those things that don't require like the oversight or like the review time of people. Hey, let's go pull some reports. Cool. Like, I can set this up to run every Monday and pull these reports in from me. Hey, it's math. Like, I can just go and extract this data, run some math on it, and give me a display back of it. Great thing to automate. That lets people actually go and do like critical thinking on top of it, right? I talk to project manager, project executives all the time, and they would all love to spend more time evaluating how to get their project back on schedule than like actually just reporting out on the fact that they're behind schedule, right? And so
Right.
if we can just help them understand that they're behind schedule by running them a report every Monday instead of the 45 minutes or an hour that they have to spend now, it just shows up in their inbox. Now we're talking about them actually getting to spend that 45 minutes to an hour going, okay, cool, what actually happened? And what can I do to fix it, right? And to get back to that problem solving that, candidly, a lot of us love about this industry.
Yeah, I like to equate that to like, if you have if you could have something do 75% of the work, then you can spend 25% of the rest of your time can go in the 25%, rather than spend all your time in the 75% and then not have the time to get to the 25%, which you all want to get to.
And I think the other thing that people that need to understand too is like, it won't always get it right the first time, just like an intern, right? Like, they're gonna screw some things up. The AI is gonna make some stuff up, right? So yeah, you will have to go back and fix some things, and you'll have to get better at giving it instructions, just like you would be an intern, right? And then you'll get more confidence in it because you'll see it do it right a few times, right? And so then now that 25% of checking it goes down to 10%, right? Then it goes down to 5%. And now it's like, okay, cool. I've seen this enough times to know that it's just going to do it right. And I'm just going to let it happen. Yeah.
That's interesting. And you think like the industry, I mean, we share some of the same customers. So, what our customers say is like, if AI is wrong, then you are wrong. And it's kind of your responsibility to make sure that AI is not wrong. Do you see it the same way? Like, where do you see that line? Sounds like you see kind of the same way.
I see it the same way, right? Like, it's a good, like, I'll give you an example from 10 years ago. You go and lay out on a job site and you show up with a total station, right? And you have an old school survey and rod, and you go do it that way, or you've got a robotic total station. And if the layout of one of the underground rough ends is wrong, nobody says, the total station was wrong, right? They go and they say, hey, layout guy, you screwed this up, right? At the end,
Right.
it's not the tool we use to do the job. It doesn't matter which one. Like at the end of the day, there's still kind of that human responsibility. And so that's the only thing we can be accountable for, right? It's really hard today for us to be like, oh, well, it's the software's fault, right? Like, well, who do we
Right.
sue then, right? And we're a very litigious industry.
Yeah. Yeah. In some ways, like, you cannot say like, well, the ruler was broken, so like I
Yeah.
couldn't measure it.
Yeah.
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 Awesome. Well, that's really cool to hear. I mean, we see a lot of that the same way. So, if there's one thing that Procore and Datagrid could do together, and given everything we just talked about here, nobody else has cracked yet, like where would you say that is? I mean, you don't need to be too specific, but
Yeah, I think if there's a thing that we can solve together, it's really helping people get high quality data into the system with as little effort as possible and from many different sources, right? And I think that's actually a great place for us to like work together, is because Procore has built this project management, this construction management platform, which has become a system intelligence for a lot of our customers, right? But it's today doesn't have all the data from all the sources that it could. And so how do we work together to take data from other places, condition that data, right? Make sure that it's right, make it better, make it clearer, like format it appropriately, and then get it into our systems. And then maybe even like round trip it again, right? Like every time something happens, we need to look at it again. The more that we can automate that and streamline the data input and output, I think the better off our customers will be, because then they get to focus on the things that they care about, right? Which is getting the job done, solving the hard problems, and focusing on getting candidly hospitals and schools and water treatment plants built so that we can run the world around us.
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think AI has a big role to play in that, because data quality is really hard with just humans, right? I mean, like, you see how hard it is for, we talk about architects getting things into drawings and then like missing things and whatnot, and like the data that they have to create out of thin air, like out of nothing, right? Like out of like just looking at a plot of land and imagining a building, right? Like, and they get a bunch of stuff in there, and some of it needs to be worked on. And I think when you think about AI helping in that process, and then downstream from that, like everything that has to do with creating information, if AI can help, then you get much better data, because it's so laborious to create it.
Yeah, and like I go back to like the superintendents I used to work with, right? I would get daily logs that were like 7 words, right? But you would go and you would sit down with them and you go, hey, what happened today on the job site? Oh, blah, 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 blah. They'd give you a 3-hour dissertation on literally everything that happened on the job site, right? And why it happened, what problem they were solving. And I'm like, why can't we get that level of information and data into the systems we have? Because nobody wants to take the time and to like sit down, write it down, type it out, whatever it may be, right? They know it,
Yeah.
it's up here, right? They know how to translate it because they understand what's going to matter and what's not going to matter. So let's find a better way to collect it from them than we have in the past. And I think that's really meaningful.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think do you have any stories, any construction site stories, where it sums up like the need for better technology? I mean, you kind of like hinted on one here, but
Yeah, I mean, listen, I can tell you that the first job site I was ever on was a 13-story office building in Baltimore that was 2 buildings that were built at separate times, but they were connected. And the owner wanted to basically separate the 2 buildings so they could sell one off and then do the other. So we had to do a whole bunch of renovations, build a new elevator tower, all these things. And I was in charge of the hardware room. So the hardware room is where like all the hinges, all the door locks, all the door stoppers, all that stuff. Man, I'll tell you, like when we think about how materials like show up on a job site, how things go missing, right? How it's hard to understand, like even like a level of understanding of like what different types of lock sets are, which directions they go, all that stuff. I was so out of my depth, and I was like a few weeks into my career, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing here, right? I could just imagine, like, listen, like being there today and how I would solve that problem differently of just like, oh, here's this thing. Here's exactly which door it goes to. Here's how you install it, all because I know what task you're doing today, and I can make sure that you've got to go pull X, Y, and Z pieces, and now it needs to go put in there. Like, there's some of these things that I just think we haven't gotten to the granular level in our industry that we have in many other industries around, like whether it's material tracking, whether it's around like installation manuals and like the process. And where I get excited about like AI and large language models is you can create that stuff on the fly now, right?
Mhm.
It's like you have the cut sheets, you have the specifications, you have all that stuff is readily available somewhere out on the internet. And it's like, okay, break this down for me on what I need to go do to get this task done in 20 minutes instead of in 60, right?
Right.
And we all just want to put more work in place. I mean, that's the end of the day. Like every construction person you ever talk about, whether it's a welder, they just want to tell you about how many pieces of steel they hung that day, right? Like you go talk to a plumber, it's like, how many feet of pipe did I put in? How many toilets did I set? Like they just want to put more work in place. And so remove the barriers. That's where we need the technology.
Wow. Well, it sounds like we should start thinking about, smart glasses again. Um, it's another way to enable that. That's awesome. So let's move on to like a fun question here. Like I saw an Oscars the other day, construction Oscars.
Yeah.
Uh, so there's events where people go and celebrate, and then there's a lot of startups in construction tech. We know the rate of success in construction tech, and companies come, and there's a lot of movement around it, and then eventually we see the winners and losers. But what is the uh, that was did you know that was a thing, an Oscar in construction tech?
Well,
First of
yeah,
all,
maybe not as specific as an Oscar, but like these Project of the Year awards, right? These Innovation of the Year. So candidly, like Procore at Groundbreak next week, I'll have the honor of presenting our Groundbreaker of the Year, as well as our Project of the Year and our Innovation Award of the Year, right? And I think the thing that's really like important about these is it's actually telling the stories of where things went right? We always hear the stories around when things go wrong, right? People love to tell those stories. The war stories are the best. But we don't do a great job of celebrating the successes that we actually have had, right? Whether it's
yeah,
just a completely epic project that was built, right? Maybe it's an airport, maybe it's, who knows, a bridge, like maybe it's the speed that they went. It just kind of paints the picture of what's possible and why we're all in this industry in the first place, right? And then when it comes to like technology, I think it's really important for us to tell those stories because I think there's a lot of people out there that still go, that stuff will never happen, right? Now, I put a little asterisk next to that because the other thing that they say is, oh, and if there's anybody on from Turner, I'm sorry, that's Turner. They have billions of dollars just to throw at that stuff, right? Like there is this like kind of, oh, well, how much of that is real? How much have they deployed that across the organization? And there's like a hesitancy to believe. But I would ask people like we need the award we need to have in this industry, and I'm gonna politic for this. We need the adoption award. We need to award the company that actually took a piece of technology and not did the coolest project with it, but got the most adoption across their entire company, right? And the most people using it, and it made the biggest business impact, right? We all talk about, oh, well, we use this, robot to do better drywall. It cut 3 days off the drywall schedule. Great. How many people actually interacted with it? Oh, the one drywall guy, right? How many lives did it actually impact? Well, that guy, or maybe like two others. And how much time did it actually, was the project done ahead of time? Or was it just the drywall package was delivered ahead of time, right? And focus more on those like outcomes of a project or a business and like how we
right.
impact human lives more than we do sometimes around like, oh, it was great. We used this technology. It was fantastic. We did this thing. And, sometimes it's the boring stuff. I always tell this joke. My biggest claim to fame when I was at my previous company from a technology deployment was DocuSign. So boring, but everybody loved it. Everybody used it. Saved us days on contract, like 24 days on average, right?
Wow.
Talk about business impact, touched everybody in the company. Nobody ever complained and wanted to go back to the old way, right? How often does that happen? And it's like, I need more DocuSigns in my life. They don't always have to be the most complicated things to roll out. Sometimes they're just simple and they just make sense.
That's awesome. Yeah, DocuSign is there's a tremendous amount of success within construction because there's so much paper. So, lightning question here. We're getting to the end of it. So I want to throw you five quick questions. If you weren't in construction, what would you be building instead?
If I wasn't in construction, what would I be building? It's a great question. I would probably be working in the golf industry. That's actually how I ended up in construction. I went to school to be a civil engineer because I wanted to design golf courses. And there's three ways to get into golf course design. One is to be a civil engineer, another is to be a landscape architect, and the third is to be a turf management person. I realized that I wasn't artistic enough to be an architect. I was more of a math and science guy, and I didn't know that turf was going to be a long-term career because, like, what do you do with it if you don't get into the field you want? And so I went to be a civil engineer. And I learned very quickly that unless you have the right last name, Nicholas Palmer, Gilhans, like people don't pay you to design golf courses. And so I kind of stumbled into construction, but I have a love of that industry. I have a passion project that I'm researching right now around a combination between like fitness and like golf simulator / app idea for those nerdy golf people out there, like the Grint plus a simulator place plus like a hard exercise works all in one like rolled up package is kind of how I think about it. So that's what I'd be doing if I wasn't in construction. I'd be building a company around that.
Wow. Well, real passion for golf. I mean, that's where we met live at that show. I mean, that wasn't the first time we met, but that's awesome to hear. What is one old school skill you think you learned in the job that you still use to this day?
I think I'd go back to people, right? Like
follow up.
Well, I think follow up, right? When I think back to being like a project engineer, I think the thing that made me a good project engineer is I followed up on everything, right? I kept good lists. I called people back. I responded to emails or faxes back in the day, right? And so like that's a skill that I think I learned early on in my career, that like people thought you were dependable when you followed up really, really well. It's also like one of my pet peeves when people don't follow up. So it's gone the other extreme, right? Like it's like simple, just respond. That's all you can say. You don't know, you can say I'll get back to you later, but like just respond. That's probably a skill like that I think has really stuck with me over the course of the years.
Oh, yeah, it's true. I mean, follow up is one of the most, I think, underappreciated skills. And actually, people that are good at follow up with AI, they're just like excellent. They're exceptional because they can use it to follow up as many times as they need and as effectively, with as much context as they need. So like AI has like made people that are good at follow up even better.
Yeah.
Awesome. And like last question is, if you could describe the future of construction in 3 words, what would they be?
3 words. I'm just going to use 2. Automation and augmentation.
Okay.
I just think that like the future will be a place where we automate things and then we augment our people with the right tools, whether it's robotics, whether it's wearables, whether it's data. Like it's going to be an industry full of automation and augmentation, and it's going to make our people much more successful and have much longer and fulfilling careers sometimes than maybe they do today.
That's awesome. I mean, I think that's how the industry has evolved. We augment people with tools. So
yeah.
Awesome. This was great, Chris. Thanks for everybody that joined in. We'll be sharing this on social media in all of our channels. Thanks for listening in.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.